right, guys, very excited to have our friend Matt Stoller in studio. He is, of course, the author of Big by Matt Stoller over on Substack, and also he is at the American Economic Liberties Project and great on all things antitrust and much more. Great to see you, Matt.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me.
You had a piece recently you can put up on the screen that I really took interest in. The headline is, "Why has Trump stopped attacking big business?" In 2016, you say Donald Trump went after CEOs so often that the Wall Street Journal set up a tracker of stocks whose leaders he had insulted. No longer. What happened? So take us through the shift from 2015 vintage Trump to the way Trump talks today, and has there been a policy shift that has accompanied that rhetorical shift as well?
Yeah, so I was really surprised because I'm not a Trump hater. I mean, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not a Trump hater. But I went back to 2016 and 2017 because I noticed he hasn't really been attacking CEOs very often. I was like, is that a thing?
What happened?
And so I looked at the last 3 speeches he gave because you can't really trust the press, and
Right.
their reporting on Trump is just dumb. And so I just read his speeches, which are long and rambling, but he didn't attack any CEOs. He still was against immigrants, and he had some of the traditional stuff in there, but it was that was gone. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went back to 2015, 2016, 2017 and looked at the stuff he had said, and I was surprised. I thought I paid close attention to Trump, but it was really surprising because of just how often and how aggressive he was about attacking Ford, Nabisco. He called for a boycott of Apple at a certain point. He was he went after Jeff Bezos for being a monopolist and not paying his taxes and said he's going to have a huge antitrust problem under me. And he was his final ad was amazing. It was a 2-minute long ad that was the global power structure, and it was, is trying to defeat me, and they've outsourced your jobs, and it was pictures of Wall Street, pictures of empty factories. It was straight up populist, economic populist stuff. Yep. And then when he got into office, he was not FDR. Right, to put it he did do some real things though. He was mostly an orthodox Republican, corporate tax cuts and stuff like that, or deregulation. But he actually did, the tariffs were different. So he did some tariffs, didn't close the trade deficit. That got worse, but he did change our trade policy framework. And there's some weird stuff in trade as well. Like under Trump is the first use of environmental rules to stop illegal logging ever. In Peru. It was crazy. And that was just because Trump is a protectionist, and he was well, we want to protect the domestic. Yeah, that's exactly right. But it's and there's labor organizing in Mexico because of some of the things that Trump did, which is, again, protectionist. If labor costs in Mexico go up, less offshoring.
This was part of I remember this.
Yeah. So and this is both the Democrats in Congress and Trump, but it was real, not, it's certainly maybe I'm saying 20% of it was real and 80% of it was just pro-corporate. But on antitrust, same thing. Lots of huge mergers, bad stuff, but he did challenge AT&T Time Warner, right? Which was the first challenge of a merger like that in 40 years. He did bring a suit against Google and a suit against Facebook. These were huge. Remember when Facebook tried to start their own currency, Libra? He helped.
We had you on to talk about that.
It feels so long ago, but he did. He helped block that, right? So there was real stuff. But on the other hand, there was standard deregulation, and inequality got worse. It wasn't. I don't want to overstate it, but there was some populism there, right? It was certainly not what you would expect from a standard Republican administration. And Wall Street actually funded Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden in 2020 more than they did Trump.
Right.
Okay. Today, he gets about 50% more money from Wall Street or from securities industry and finance industry than Biden does, right? So there's been this really big shift in the money, and he is still talking about immigration, but he isn't talking about, the Wall Street establishment or anything like that. The populism has kind of moved to foreign policy a little bit. He's kind of if I were in charge, none of this bad stuff would be happening, right? So that's not you can laugh at it, but it's it's moved. I'm just looking at the rhetoric, right? In terms of your question about what's the policy change going to be, I don't know. Nobody knows. Right. And I talk to my friends on the right, and they're this doesn't look good, but we don't know. I mean, my friends on the right are realignment types, and they're just kind of we don't think he's going to be good, but they're not sure.
I think the Trump thesis is simple. He got more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016. He doesn't need any of that. You could literally pass TCJA. You can be very popular. He's currently beating Joe Biden in the polls, and he went to the business roundtable and was like, I'm going to cut all of your taxes. And only people like you and me are even going to pay attention to any of that. Other people are going to go to the grocery store and say stuff is too pricey or too high. So, I mean, reflected in your speech, what does he even say about the economy? Like, other than the economy is bad, in terms of the speeches that you read?
Well, he says, it was awesome when I was president.
Right, yeah, that's it.
He's like, remember when it was awesome?
Yeah.
And people are like, I guess I do that. I remember that.
Yeah.
And that works. There's a nostalgia pack. I'm not saying like, I'm not giving an electoral analysis, but I will say this. The polling does show that voters think that Trump is on the side of Wall Street a lot more than Biden.
Oh, interesting.
And so there is vulnerability there.
Yeah, that was really interesting in your report. I encourage people to look at that polling you pulled out because I hadn't seen that, and I did think that was really interesting, and I bet would represent a massive shift from the way he was positioned in 2016, where I would say core part of his appeal, I mean, it was drain the swamp, and it was, the TPP was a huge piece of his appeal. Right. Anti-immigrant was also part of it as well then too. But, in terms of the Wall Street money, is the shift exclusively that they're more comfy with Trump? He's not saying that stuff anymore. Also, we were there during Trump and things were actually pretty good for us. Or is it more that they've been unhappy with some of the actions that Biden has taken, specifically in the area of antitrust, where you focus? And also, I mean, Biden, the other piece here is Trump was very, in spite of, the talk about labor, his National Labor Relations Board was packed with exactly the type of characters you would expect in any Republican administration, standard approach towards actual labor issues. The Biden administration has taken a different tack there as well. Yeah,
I think it's kind of funny. So just to give you an example, like Trump, remember when the second Boeing Max crashed, right? And Trump was so like deregulatory that he wouldn't even ground the Max airline, like airplanes, until every other everyone else in the world had grounded them. And I like saw that recently. I was like, oh yeah, I remember like endless little decision after little decision that I was like kind of terrifying. Things like arsenic in water or like the Boeing 737 Max. And it was really maddening as a liberal to see the like liberals focus on stuff that was stupid instead of the stuff
like
that he was.
Russiagate. The Boeing.
I remember this whole thing about like, whatever. But the point is that there were a lot of like policy choices that I think we kind of ignored that I'm sort of like looking at and saying, oh, that's kind of a problem. But on the
Biden side of things,
how
does Wall Street feel about him? Because I'm sort of trying to draw you out because we do a lot of Biden criticism here.
Right.
And you recently tweeted that Biden had been a quote pretty good president. In certain sense, like I have major issues with him on foreign policy. On economic policy, the stuff you focus on, I actually agree in a certain sense. On antitrust, I think he's represented a significant shift. On the labor issues that I care a lot about, he's represented somewhat of a shift as well. So what's your case for why he's been pretty good and why that may have rubbed Wall Street the wrong way?
It's kind of funny. I like to tweet like, Biden's pretty good, just because it annoys everyone on Twitter, right? And like the establishment just kind of hates Biden. Like what's interesting is that it's like cool to support Trump now, right? Whereas in 2016, it was like cool to support Clinton.
On Twitter, that's true. I don't know if it's true in general, but yeah.
Well, it's true on Wall Street, apparently.
I think if you go to like any group of young people and you're like, hey, do you like Biden? They'll be like, no, right? Like he sucks. But if you're like, and if you just put you give them like a piece of paper, say who you're going to vote for. Sure. They'll like write Biden. Okay. But it's like not cool to say it, right?
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
Yeah.
But okay, so Biden, he's incoherent and his administration is incoherent. But in a number of ways, like you would think Wall Street would really like him, right? Because the stock market's at record highs, executive pay is good, like they're making a lot of money, but like they're really mad. And they're really mad because they're not allowed to merge. Right? There's been $11 trillion of mergers that have not happened because there's an antitrust regime that says, no, you can't buy up all your rivals and raise prices. They're also doing things like helping workers organize, which is not something that it's not the kind of law that I look at, but that is something that's happening. They're doing things like banning non-compete agreements, which is really important. Private equity loves to like lock up all the doctors in an area and not let them go work for someone else, or lock up all the vets in an area or nurses or whatever. And the Biden administration is saying, no, you can't do that. Yesterday, the Biden administration just said, we're not going to let Adobe like continue to make it impossible to cancel your subscription to their like products, right? And everyone in the creative field is like hates Adobe because they just charge you a lot of money and don't let you.
I think
like,
we pay
cancel.
for Adobe. I'm pretty sure in the back room.
But like if you try to cancel, like good luck with that, right? Like getting on the phone, like all these junk fees that these guys are laying on you. The thing about all that stuff is that there's like a billionaire behind every junk fee. And they are really mad that like someone is telling them no because they're not used to hearing no. And so like having some, no, most of the Democrats don't know that their party is doing this. Like another example is the IRS just came out with its own free version of TurboTax, right?
I saw that.
And you will now be able to like file your taxes, and the people who will be like the customer service are like work at the IRS. And like Intuit's stock just like took a dive but that's like one more thing that's much less annoying in our lives because of what Biden is doing, but it's also like Intuit's going to be really mad, and like they're all, all the lobbyists, they're all friends with each other, and so that's what's going on here is like the nest of people with capital are getting really mad, not because they're losing money, they're actually making more money, but because someone's telling them no, and it's these random people in the Biden administration.
Do you have confidence those things will continue in a second Biden administration? Because, and I guess this gets to the question of like, what is his orientation towards those policies? Because it's not something he talks about a lot.
Right.
They have certainly done a terrible job of selling these pieces. Like they don't lean into this.
Yeah.
So does Joe Biden know this is happening? Does he care it's happening? Is this important to him in terms of what he would do in a second term?
It's a little bit like Trump. We don't know.
Don't know.
Right? Like Ron Klain, who was the first White House chief of staff, was super into this stuff.
Right.
Jeff Zients doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
He's
also
the
filthy
opposite of
rich
into
because
this.
of the opposite.
He's like, he's like Anchorman, like Brick Tanlin.
Yeah.
He's just like, he's polite and rarely late. And that's why he's totally superficial.
Yes.
He knows nothing. Like their next chief of staff after Jeff Zients, if he's into this stuff or she's into this stuff, like then it'll be.
So in other words, it's not up to Biden just doesn't care.
We have well, Biden, it's not that Biden doesn't care. Biden like has an instinct. He doesn't like people getting screwed. He doesn't like CEOs because he thinks they talk down to him. He like kind of generally is like working people are getting screwed, but he's not that interested in it and he doesn't follow the details. So like, it's different than Obama. Obama was very like hungry, aggressive, and like straight neoliberal. The people are revolting and we need to like put our boot on their neck, right? Like, but in a cool way, right? Like that was his thing.
With celebs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like, and he's like an influencer type, right? Like Biden actually has the opposite view, but he just doesn't, his like interest is foreign policy, right? Where he's doing an awesome job.
No.
But, Anyway, but the thing is
that that's true. In his mind, he's killing it.
There's a lot of legitimate criticisms of Biden, right? Yeah. But I think a lot of the like vibe hostility to him is actually coming from big money, right? All of the people on Wall Street and Silicon Valley, and like they all pay off academia. They're all like, none of them have an incentive to say, I don't like Adobe overcharging you, right? Because there's some group of people making money from that, and they're all friends with a group of people making money from everything. It's like if you attack the things that people don't like in our society in commerce, you will make people very angry. And that is why when I put up on Twitter, because I think of Twitter as like, it's sort of like, that's what organized money is talking about.
Sure.
Like,
right.
When you put up something on Twitter, like, Biden's pretty good. Like, the rage, like the level of rage, they're not like, oh, well, but what about it? He's doing there or there. It's like here or there. It's the rage is aggressive.
Yeah.
And you can, and it's out of like whack to what he's truly doing.
So I think that's fair. Last thing I'll question you on, though, is my assessment's a little bit different, which is that I think the things you're talking about, especially the antitrust piece, also the labor organizing piece, which is very important to me, I think these could make a significant difference in our economy a little bit down the road. But it doesn't pay off for people, by and large. I mean, the junk fee stuff, that's real right now, but it doesn't pay off right now in the short term. And on the other hand, you've had, over the course of the Biden administration, all of the COVID social safety net that was spun up. You've had that piece by piece by piece taken away so that, people are more strapped in terms of cash. The amount in their bank account is lower. You've seen net worth, especially among some demographics, continue to decline. If you're a young person, you're looking at the housing market, you're like, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. You've had inflation. Inflation is cooling somewhat, but prices are still much higher than they were under the Trump administration. So I think there's some there, especially among, people who are not yet asset owners in terms of their sense of how this economy is for them right now in this moment.
Well, who cares about people who don't have assets? No,
Good
look,
point, Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and we'll end it there. No, I mean, well, look at something very basic, which is gas prices. Okay,
Yeah.
gas prices have come down a lot. And they've come down a lot because of Biden policies, right? And very explicitly, like they figured out there was a big price fixing conspiracy in terms of withholding production, the fracking companies. And then they released oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to break that cartel. It worked. And gas prices are much lower than they were. They're not as necessarily as low as they were before the pandemic, but they have come down a lot, okay? The rent, okay, or airplanes, right, airlines, prices are actually below where they were in 2019. You take something like rent. Rent is a huge problem. The Biden administration is actually bringing an antitrust case against a company that has software that fixes.
We covered it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you guys know, like, of course, but like the you're one of the only people that know about it. Like, if you don't explain what you're doing, right, then how are people going to know? I mean, there are real like. Trump said, I lowered pharmaceutical prices. It wasn't true, but a lot of people believed it because he kept saying it, right? I'm not, this is not a criticism of Trump. It's kind of like, if you don't explain what you're doing, there's no way for anyone to know what you're doing. So it's true, there are a lot of huge problems that I think people are experiencing. There are always a lot of huge problems that people are experiencing. I'm not like a political expert or anything, but it does seem to me like if you are not explaining what you're doing, then people aren't going to know what you're doing. It just seems very basic.
That seems pretty clear.
Well said.
But yeah.
All right. Well, it's great talking to you, man. Appreciate you coming down. People should read the piece and subscribe to the Substack. Otherwise, we'll see you all later.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.